Hello and welcome to the BA Sports Podcast. Today I've got a special guest on. It is Jim Coventry at Jim Coventry NFL. He was 2022's Fantasy Sports Writers Association Fantasy Writer of the Year Finalist. He's been in the industry for about 15 to 20 years. He's been playing fantasy since the late 90s, and he joined Rotowire in 2016. He's also a host of 2 Sirius XM shows for Rotowire. Hey, Jim, how are you doing today?
Oh, man, it's August. It's overwhelming, but it's fun. We wouldn't have it any other way. Let's go with some football, right?
Yes, sir. I'm ready to talk some football. So let's dive right into kind of a round by round analysis so we can give the listeners, I haven't done this for them yet, give them something to talk about and watch for their upcoming drafts in the next couple of weeks. So in round one, I kind of want to start out and go over some of my players I want to draft and avoid in this round, and then hear what you have to say about this first round. So starting off round one, I'm looking to get Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Bijan Robinson, maybe Nick Chubb at the end of round one, if he somehow is available there, or early round two. And I'm looking to avoid Saquon. I'm just kind of worried about that situation with him and his injury history, and I'd rather have a guy like Bijan Robinson who's a little younger. So, Jim, who do you look to target in round one? I'm looking to go wide receiver early if I have an early pick in round one, and then maybe running back in later round one. What about you?
So the big five are the big five. I mean, Justin Jefferson, McCaffrey, Chase, Tyreek Hill, and maybe even Cooper Kupp, although I'm shying away from drafting him because I'm concerned about Matthew Stafford holding up really more than Kupp, neck and back. But other than that, Nick Chubb's a player I am targeting. And I am in the Kings Classic. I reached up to 9 to get him because it was a 14-team league. My next pick was 20. I wasn't getting him there. I just think that they're going to run 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets. For the first time in his career, he's going to see light boxes, and he is going to be lethal in that scenario. And as much as I like Bijan, he's still a little bit of an unknown. And so I like Chubb over him, but it's going to be hard to fade Bijan because, like we said, we kind of know what we have coming in. But CeeDee Lamb's another player I like in the first round. At the end of it, I think last year it was really from week 9 on. We saw the superstar status that he picked up. He was good all season, but it was a new level. And I think with Brandon Cooks there, he can actually expand on that.
Yep, I think he can do that too. I actually have him as my wide receiver 5 this year because I think with the addition of Brandon Cooks and you finally get a healthy Michael Gallup, I don't think he was at his best last year. This really helps that Dallas offense, and I just think they're out to win a Super Bowl this year, this Cowboys team. They look like they want it this year and kind of seen it. And yeah, Brandon Cooks, huge addition. I loved what I saw from Bijan last night. I know people had some questions about him, whether he's the starter. You know, they released the depth chart with running back 3 as Bijan, and everyone knew that that wasn't going to be the case. I mean, they took him 7th overall. We knew he was going to be the guy. He's going to be the guy there. I don't think anyone has to worry about that. But yeah, I also am avoiding Kupp. And yeah, Matthew Stafford, I don't know if he can stay healthy. And I think Kupp can stay healthy this year. You know, he had a surgery on his ankle, and I talked to Dr. Jesse Morse of the fantasy doctors, and he was pretty adamant on saying that you shouldn't have to worry about Cooper Kupp's health. You should be more worrisome of Matthew Stafford's health. So let's go into round 2.
Oh, I forgot to give you my stayaways. I'm sorry.
Totally
Forgot.
No, stay away.
At ADP, the player is wonderful. The player is going to have a great floor. But at pick 10, I can't take Amon Ra St. Brown, and here's my reason. He has basically 2 seasons, 1,150 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's about his baseline. Now, I know rookie year he got eased in, but he made up for that when all their receivers were out and he got all the targets. And then last year, he did hurt an ankle and he missed a little time, but that's normal. So I think that's what we're getting out of him. But if you're going to tell me he's the 10th pick in a draft, and we're going to have Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams after him. Now, I know Adams has some discord, but both of those players, I believe their floor is better than St. Brown's ceiling. I think there is no world other than injury where St. Brown can reach either of them. And the fact he's going before them, if St. Brown is the 14th or 15th pick in a draft, all day long. At the
Yep.
10th pick, no way. And then Austin Ekeler as the running back, too. I really feel with Kellen Moore there, this is not going to be an offense that runs through the running back and a slot receiver anymore. It's going to be a lot more downfield Mike Williams, and then Ekeler and Keenan Allen will be important components, but it won't be them running the offense. And if Ekeler loses 20 targets, he's not the running back too.
Yep, and I'm also worried about touchdown regression for Ekeler. He had about 18 to 20 touchdowns in the past 2 years. Yep. I think it's going to regress to more around 10 to maybe at the max 15.
Yep.
So, yeah, I do love Amon Ra in the second round if you can get him there. So you just have to monitor. I think if he falls far enough, I'm pulling the trigger on him because I think he's going to see the targets. But like you said, I would rather have Garrett Wilson, and I would have probably rather have Davante. Davante provides a solid floor. I mean, last year he had like 180 targets, so we know he's going to get force-fed the ball. And I those are some guys I'd like in round 2. So speaking of round 2, let's go to round 2. I really love Tony Pollard in this range. I like going Tony Pollard, and I also like usually I've been doing wide receiver first round and then try and get Pollard and Chubb. It really depends on your league size though, because I'm not sure if Pollard and Chubb will be available. If you draft, say, Jamar Jefferson, you're probably going to have to look at a guy like maybe Jonathan Taylor, but I'm not too keen on that situation with this whole contract ordeal. And another guy that may make it to you in late round 2 is Josh Jacobs. I'm worried about his contract situation. Me personally, I'd rather have Zamir White later in drafts. I mean, he's practically free. And if for some reason Josh Jacobs were to sit out at all, Zamir White is going to be that guy in that offense. But some main guys that I'm really looking to target are Garrett Wilson and A.J. Brown in this range. If they fall into the middle, late round 2, maybe Josh Jacobs, or sorry, not Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson in round 3. But those are some of the guys. I know some quarterbacks like to go in round 2, and I was wondering if you would draft a quarterback in round 2 depending on league size.
So I do not draft quarterbacks in round 2, and actually, as great as the big 3, Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen, any order, of course, I just because of their draft costs, my process on drafting quarterbacks is I am very happy with the next tier of quarterbacks. Again, any order: Herbert, Burrow, Fields, Lamar, any order. But so basically once the league starts drafting the beginning of that second tier, that's when I'm shopping. So I won't take a top 3. I don't like my roster builds when I have a quarterback early, and I think that next tier gives me enough firepower.
Yep. Like the next tier, like Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, all those guys. I really do like Justin Herbert this year. So I was wondering, do you like Garrett Wilson? And I know you mentioned him earlier and said you'd rather have him than Amon Ra. And I was just wondering, why are you so high on Garrett Wilson this year?
Yeah, so Garrett Wilson, it was after, I believe, as a week 10 bye. His targets went up from 7.5 a game to nearly 10 per game. So again, this is a player, a rookie. Sometimes we see this. Teams figure things out on a bye week. At that point, and they had horrendous quarterback play. He only caught 82 of 147 targets. So now we go to Aaron Rodgers. So when I look at this, now, also, you got to understand the offensive coordinator is Nathaniel Hackett. And I know he was a train wreck as a head coach, but he was the coordinator in Green Bay with Rodgers and Adams. And when I was listening to the Athletics podcast, they had somebody who covered that Packers team then. And they mentioned that Davante Adams was drawn up as the primary read on 70% of pass plays. Now, that is ridiculous. I mean, 40%, yes, 70%. Now, Wilson is so far the alpha in this offense. Lazard's a good blocker and a situational receiver. Hardman's a gadget guy. Cobb is kind of done. There's nobody there. So Wilson could get the same treatment that Davante Adams did. And with 1,100 yards with no quarterbacks last year, I think his floor is 1,300. And I think we could see an incredible season of 15 or 1,600 yards. So, yes, I'm on him. You mentioned A.J. Brown. He is falling into the second round, and I don't know why. Almost 1,500 yards last year, and this is a Eagles team that didn't throw in the second half of a lot of games because they were winning, their schedule is much tougher this year. They may have to throw in more games for 4 quarters. A.J. Brown is a legitimate number 1 receiver, 145 targets. He was only getting 110 in Tennessee. That number could go up. A.J. Brown, there's a world where that target share goes to 160. He could be the wide receiver 1. And then Chris Olave is another guy I like if he falls later in round 2. Not excited about Derek Carr, but he can win at every level. He kind of showed he was one of the cleanest prospects to come out. And what he did last year, he's going to build on that in year 2, but he's a legit superstar.
Yeah, I love Chris Olave this year. Yeah, like you were saying, A.J. Brown, he only caught 88 passes last year. The other top 5 wide receivers, they all caught over 100 passes. That is Justin Jefferson, Davante, Tyreek, and Stephon Diggs. They all had at least 100 receptions. So A.J. Brown was not only gaining a ton of yards per reception, but he also was, making the most out of everything he could with Jalen Hurts. And they were literally, I think it was one game, he had 3 touchdowns in like the first half. And then after that,
Pittsburgh.
They didn't really do much after that because they didn't need to. And I had him on my team last year, and he was a stud. So, I'm looking to draft him again this year. And Chris Olave, something I saw recently was him burning one of the Chargers cornerbacks in their practice that they had. And he can beat a guy one-on-one really easy. He has a ton of speed. I love Chris Olave this year. Last year, Chris Olave finished as a top 24 wide receiver, and I think he can easily do that again. And I think he has the tools this year to finish as a top 12 wide receiver. So, another guy I didn't mention that I'm a little worried about in this range is Derrick Henry, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on him. I also saw Tajay Spears. He looked like a stud last weekend. Every run, every kick return, really every touch he had, he looked like he could cut into Henry's touches this year. And Henry's getting up there in age, which kind of worries me the most. But I want to hear your thoughts on Derrick Henry this year.
Yeah, I had 2 players that in the second round I wouldn't take, and we already talked about Mahomes. The other one I had listed was Henry, and it's nothing against him. I mean, yes, his yards per carry have gone down from the mid-5s to the mid-4s. And that's been a combination of age and offensive line. That line may be worse this year. Their right tackle, Nick Petit-Frere, he is out for 6 games. He's bad. They're going to go to somebody even worse. The line is a train wreck.
Oh, yeah.
And Derrick Henry has done well despite that. But I'm not going to bet against him on age, but I can't click the draft button. I just got to go. I either got to go to a receiver. Sometimes Tony Pollard's there. I can't just take him. And I'm not telling anybody not to take him, but I just think the situation around him is not healthy. And if there is any more regression at all, now it's helped that he's actually doubled his receiving production from early in his career. Instead of 1 catch a game, he's getting 2 and he's getting decent yardage. And in PPR, it kind of offset some of the yardage, but I'm struggling to draft him.
Yep, I am too. It's nothing to do with the guy. He's super talented, but the offensive line around him, I think, is the worst in the league, in my opinion. Yes. So, avoid Derrick Henry for both of us. And let's go to round 3. So, I was kind of curious because I don't know if Zeke's impact has an impact on Ramondre Stevenson. Was Zeke coming in? I think, running back 8 last year was Tony Pollard. Was Zeke taking all those touchdowns away? So I didn't really move him down that much. I currently have Ramondre in my top 10 running backs because I think he's going to see the PPR volume for receptions and targets. But Zeke's going to be a guy that can steal some goal line touches. And I know people are trying to fade Ramondre, and he's falling back into round 3 and 4. And maybe even further because people just don't want to take him because Ezekiel Elliott is there now. And I want to know, are you in on Ramondre Stevenson now that Zeke signed in New England?
So full disclosure, last year in May, I was very heavily invested in Ramondre Stevenson. At the time, Damian Harris was being drafted way ahead of him. And I'm going, mistake, it's Ramondre Stevenson's backfield. Harris is going to be a footnote. And all of a sudden in July, people figured that out, and then there was no more value. But I was in on Stevenson. I love him as a player. But here's the thing, and nobody's talking about this. I don't think anybody necessarily sees the stat. So he only lost 2 fumbles in his first 2 years, but he fumbled 6 times and 4 last year. Bill Belichick has a long history of not tolerating fumblers. And bringing in Ezekiel Elliott, he's fairly good ball security. He's reliable. And that could be the issue because Bill Belichick was fishing for a running back for months. He signed James Robinson and then for 2 years, and then he had to let him go. He brought in Darrell Henderson. He brought in Dalvin Cook. He brought in, obviously, Elliott. And I think I'm in Fournette. They even brought in Fournette. And I thought at first, sometimes he's doing his diligence and updating his list. No, he had signed Robinson and now he signed Elliott. So there's smoke, there's fire there. And so I'm worried that if he fumbles the ball, he's going to get banished quickly. In the receiving game, he had 89 targets last year. Look, people who are a little bit older will remember Steven Jackson of the Rams. He had that like 80 or 90 catch season when he was young. He never came close to that again. That 89 targets, there are very few running backs who get that. Remember, it was a broken offense last year with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia. They're going to run an RPO-based system this year with Bill O'Brien, and I don't know that Stevenson is the type of receiver who's going to see anywhere near 89 targets in that system. If those targets get cut down to 50, and if he loses work to Elliott, it's a very big red flag for me.
Yeah, he could be in trouble if that happens. So maybe proceed with caution when drafting Ramondre Stevenson and watching where he goes. In this round, honestly, my favorite player, I like to usually follow up my first 2 rounds. I usually go wide receiver in the first round, running back in the second, and then I try and get a wide receiver here. And the wide receiver that I'm looking to target is Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he can have a breakout year with Trevor Lawrence. We've seen it from him in Atlanta. I believe he's going to be the number 1 target in this offense. Last year, Christian Kirk and Zay Jones each saw over 120 targets, so I don't believe Calvin Ridley's going to have trouble seeing targets in this offense. I think Zay Jones is going to be under 100 targets, more in the 80 to 90 range, and Calvin Ridley can really explode this year. I think he has top 5 potential to break out and show us the best he can. In the past 2 times, we've seen A.J. Brown and Stephon Diggs go from offenses that weren't that great to way better offenses, and they've shined in those offenses. A.J. Brown last year, Stephon Diggs in his first year in Buffalo. So I'm curious on who do you like in this range? Who do you hate in this range?
So the players I like, I do have Ridley listed. What I like about him is he's very good at these dig routes, out routes, and he gets separation on those quickly. And Trevor Lawrence has already shown the ability to thrive in those routes, like basically pitch and catch, and you can't stop them. You can't double those routes because it's at the perimeter. And so it's going to be a lethal combination there. And then if Ridley can recapture what he had a few years ago, there's even a bigger element to the game. But I was heavily invested, like 17th round, 18th round picks last year on Zay Jones, because I realized, look, you're the top outside receiver for Trevor Lawrence. The upgrade to Ridley is immense. We obviously know that. But they're going to run a more traditional offense. And yeah, I do think he has a very good ceiling. A lot of people are worried about him. They're saying people are overhyped, but he's playing with what I'm expecting to be an elite quarterback. T. Higgins is another player. I have Higgins ranked above Ridley, but he is going in the 3rd round of a lot of drafts. If people just look at sheer stats from last year, they're like, okay, he's just basically a 1,000-yard guy, and that's it. He had 2 games where he had pregame injuries. He saw a total of 11 snaps in those games. It killed fantasy managers to get the zeros, but basically those were like anomalies. Those don't happen frequently. And T. Higgins, I think, was limited with that injury down the stretch, but that offense is going to take another step forward this year. Adding left tackle Orlando Brown allows Jonah Williams to move to the right side. Burrow had to get the ball out quicker than he would have liked because of the line, but that in the interior line, all 3 of them, they were new last year. They're all now in their 2nd year. So there's going to be some cohesion on the interior line. They're going to be upgraded at tackle. And if you're going to tell me you've got Chase and Higgins both with time to operate, that tells me that they're elite quarterback and the elite receivers. Both of them are going to thrive here. So I love him. Also, if I'm playing in if I'm playing in a league that has a grand prize, or if I'm playing like in the Kings Classic, a league that I have to win, like everybody wants to win their league, but a league where if you're not first, you're last. If Jonathan Taylor falls, look, if he misses 16 games, I'll still take him in the 3rd round because with that RPO-based offense and with Anthony Richardson and with an I expect Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly to bounce back this year. They had tough years on the offensive line. They're in their 20s. You just don't lose your talent. I think if Taylor shows up, he could be that league winner for you. Those are the players I like. And when you want to get me to the players I hate, I'll tell you that too.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll go over a couple players I don't like in this range. Josh Jacobs worries me. However, I don't mind it because of his upside, but I'd rather have Jonathan Taylor. That would be my guy, because if both were to fall because people are worried, I'd rather have Jonathan Taylor instead of Josh Jacobs. But that's kind of the end of that running back tier, and then it drops off kind of to Najee and Travis Etienne. I kind of like Najee this year. I just kind of want to see more in the preseason from the Steelers' backfield because it worries me. I think it was a 60-40 split between Najee and Jalen Warren last week in the preseason week one. I'm a little, if Lamar Jackson somehow it makes it up to this. I mean, I'm looking at Fantasy Pros ADP right now, and it says he's 32. At that value, I would honestly just wait on a different quarterback like Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow, especially in a 6-point per passing touchdown league. Those guys I'm not a huge fan of. And another guy in this third round, I mean, according to Fantasy Pros ADP, Breece Hall is still going 35th overall. I'm not taking him anywhere near this high because of that situation now. You've got Dalvin Cook, the rookie Israel Adebakanya. He looks really good. I think this backfield's too crowded. I'd rather have a different running back like maybe Jahmyr Gibbs in that range. But yeah, I want to hear who you have that you don't like in this third round.
In the third round, look, one of my favorite players to watch when things are going well is DK Metcalf. But in 3 of his 4 seasons, he's basically a 1,000-yard receiver, and which is fine. But people are remembering that 1,300-yard season he had a couple when they were letting Russ cook, and it worked out for a while. That season's a while away now. He hasn't been that guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that was an outlier right now. And then you're going to tell me they bring in Zach Charbonnet at running back. They add to their defensive room, adding Devon Witherspoon at corner. Pete Carroll, ultimately, he wants to run the ball. He wants to play defense. If they need to throw the ball, they will. Now you bring in Jackson Smith and Jigba as well. Now I think when he on third downs when he's on the field, that's just again it's a little bit of a drain on Metcalf's targets. Metcalf's all career high in targets. They were a lot shorter, but another receiver in the mix. Metcalf is Geno could take a step back. There's just too much working against Metcalf at that ADP, but we can't chase that 1,300-yard season. And then the other player. Again, he was lights out when he was healthy down the stretch, but Keenan Allen missed. He played 44 snaps in the first 10 weeks because of a hamstring issue. And the one thing I put together is when you're aging, recovery from injury is problematic. And I just think that's a sign of aging. Keenan Allen's in his 30s now. I just don't want to take the risk. I know the upside, but I also think that offense is going to run through Mike Williams a lot more. And Allen, instead of seeing a crazy target share, is going to see just a very good target share.
Yeah, yep. I'm kind of out on those too. Yeah, Keenan Allen's age really concerns me. He's been consistent over the years. He gets the receptions. He provides really good value. But in this range, you're looking for a guy with a little more upside than Keenan Allen. And I think you can get that in this range. You've got guys like Calvin Ridley. You've got guys like T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, maybe Chris Olave. Those guys seem to be going a little earlier than where this ADP is showing. And now going into round 4, early round 4, this guy could sneak into round 3. It's Deebo Samuel. I'm not a huge fan of Deebo Samuel, of where he's getting drafted now. You know, everyone is a huge fan of him because of that one season where he ran the ball, and they can't really get that out of their heads. And they think it's always going to happen again. But, you know, he can get as many rushing touches as he wants. I just don't think he's going to see the receiving volume. Brandon Ayuk is a better bet later in drafts that you can get for way better value. So I'd rather target a guy like Ayuk later in drafts on that offense. That offense is a crowded offense. You got Kittle, you got Deebo Samuel, you have Ayuk, you have Christian McCaffrey. So I'd rather target a guy a little later and grab a guy with more upside and a guy that I think is going to see more targets in this early round 4 range. And a guy that I think can fit that bill is actually Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper, being that wide receiver one on that Cleveland Browns offense, he's going to see the targets, and I think he can do really well this year with Deshaun Watson. Enter Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is a guy that's going to help Amari Cooper out a little bit. They also have David Njoku. I think this Browns offense is going to be a lot better than people expect.
Mm-hmm.
They have the best offensive line in the league, arguably like top 3. So that is a guy that I am targeting in early round 4. Another guy that I'm targeting in early round 4 is going to be Justin Herbert. Right now he's going 41st overall according to Fantasy Pros ADP. I want to get Herbert in this 4-5 range, maybe Justin Fields, but those are 2 guys I'm looking to target. And Jim, who are you looking to target in this round 4 range?
So 3 players in round 4. You mentioned one earlier. I always use like Fantasy Mojo for my ADP because they give me the last 3 days. It has the micro adjustments. So Najee Harris has been like a 4th round pick, but you've seen him in the 3rd, depending what you're looking at. But look, Najee Harris, and you mentioned the reasons to avoid him, but people don't a lot. This just kind of, I just heard this. I don't think people knew this. He was playing the first 8 weeks of last year with a steel plate inside his shoe. He couldn't run. And they didn't give him more than 17 carries in any game. There was a 15-17, and then everything was less than that. All of a sudden, after the bye, they take the steel plate out of the shoe. All of a sudden, he has all of his 80-plus yard games rushing. He has most of his touchdowns. He was seeing upwards of 20 carries a game. He was the guy. But they had to split the work early in the year because – and I was stunned they played him on his injured foot in the preseason. To me, that was an indication he's fine. Clearly he wasn't, but he was the player he was. Now, he's not a great running back, but here's what I like about a situation. I don't know how good Kenny Pickett's going to be, but I know they have receiving weapons. I know George Pickens is definitely a threat for defenses. Deontay Johnson, great route runner. We're seeing Calvin Austin flash a lot of speed. And I don't know what Allen Robinson has, but regardless, even with Freiermuth, they have weapons. And if they decided all to spread out the defense, it would be to the benefit of Najee Harris. But he was a bell cow and down the stretch last year, and he was productive. I'm also targeting DJ Moore. He's had, going into last year, he had at least 1,150 yards in 3 straight seasons, and he's had horrific quarterback play. People think what they want about Justin Fields. The Bears have to turn him loose this year because they have to know what they have. Do they have a franchise quarterback, or do they have to go in a different direction? I think he's a very good passer. I don't think he's a great passer, but I think he's an above average passer. DJ Moore can win every route on the tree. He can beat you deep, intermediate, and when he catches short passes, this is not because of what we saw in preseason last week. He's always been a running back with the ball in his hands. He is devastating. He just has never had a chance to show what he is. I think he could be a top 7 receiver this year. My last player I'm targeting, Aaron Jones. So here's what I don't get. Last year, he's a borderline first, second round pick, right? He puts up 1,500 scrimmage yards, and he was playing hurt down the stretch. All of a sudden, he's a 4th round pick. I just don't. There's a disconnect here, and so now that's an insane value. He is a superstar player, and he won the job from A.J. Dillon. It wasn't until late in the season when Jones hurt his foot that they started splitting carries again. They're going to go back to Jones being the guy. Those are the 3 I'm in on.
I really like Aaron Jones this year. I've been a fan of him since I drafted him in that 2019 season where he broke out and just went absolutely nuclear. And I think he can do it again. I mean, last year we saw A.J. Dillon wasn't that great on the ground. He doesn't pose a threat to Aaron Jones really in the receiving game. I think Aaron Jones is going to see a lot of volume and kind of be a safety net for that young quarterback, Jordan Love. And this is honestly why I love starting off with 2 wide receivers and 1 running back through the first 3 rounds, because you can grab another running back like Aaron Jones in this range. You could also grab a running back. Joe Mixon seems to be falling down the boards in this range, and I think Joe Mixon's going to see a lot more receiving volume this year. Now, I don't know if it's going to be as much as Aaron Jones is going to see. I think Aaron Jones is going to see significantly more receiving volume than Joe Mixon, but Joe Mixon, he doesn't have Samaje Perine behind him, but he does have a little more younger running backs behind him. They drafted a guy, I can't remember his name.
Chase Brown.
That's it, Chase Brown. Yeah, so he looks like he may not pose a significant threat to Mixon's touches. I think Mixon's a clear 3-down back, and to get guys like Mixon and Aaron Jones in this range, I think it's pretty good value. I want to hear your take on running back Dameon Pierce, because that's kind of where I'm stuck at in drafts right now, is between Dameon Pierce and Aaron Jones. And I'm kind of leaning more Aaron Jones just because I know his talent, and he also has a good receiving volume, whereas Dameon Pierce is more of a through the tacklers kind of runner.
So I had Pierce listed in my rounds 5 to 8 breakout range, guys, but we'll
Okay.
definitely talk about him now. And so what I saw last year is a very hard runner. He had a horrific offensive line last year. That line could be better this year. Their tackles are good. Interior, Kenyon Green was a rookie last year and he did not play well, but that happens. He could be in line for a bump. And then they get Shaq Mason from New England. And New England's good about getting rid of players before they get old. I think Mason still has enough in the tank for another good year. So now if you're going to tell me Pierce is behind a better line, people worried about before the injury, he had a little bit of a slowdown. He did. But don't forget, he faced the Titans in one of those games. Nobody ran on them. And then he faced Indy before the injuries completely fell apart on them. And they were an outstanding run defense. So I think part of the knock on him down the stretch was really maybe he hit a rookie wall and he really ran into just two buzzsaws of defenses that didn't respect the passing game. Why would you at Davis Mills? And they just were both able to stop anybody. It could have been Jim Brown or Barry Sanders back there, and they wouldn't have gotten anything. So that said, Pierce, people are talking about Devin Singletary. Look, Buffalo wanted to get rid of him for years. They've been looking for somebody. In Buffalo, you have plenty of yards before contact because of Josh Allen. And yet they were never happy with what he did. To me, he's slow. He's a replacement level back. Dameon Pierce is so far ahead of him. Singletary might just be a little change of pace, 5 to 8 touches, and that's going to be it. He has no threat to Pierce's workload. So to answer your question, especially when he's dropping in ADP, Dameon Pierce is a good value.
Yeah. If he's dropping into that 5th, 6th round range, I mean, why not take a flyer on the guy? He's really young. He's a strong runner. He runs with power, and I love to watch that kid run. I was pretty high on him last year. I took him later in drafts. You know, he provided some solid games, but I think this year is the year that will actually help him explode. A guy that I have in this round of 5 to 8 range for a breakout year, I think Rachaad White is in for a breakout year in year 2. Baker Mayfield targeted running backs the most out of any quarterback in the NFL last year. I think Rachaad White's going to see the targets. I've also heard that they like him as a 3-down back, and they like running him through the tackles. He's not a small back. He's a pretty big back, and I think he can provide a solid floor for you, especially for how late he's going. I mean, he's going like 75th overall in ADP, maybe even 6th into the high 60s. But I do like Rachaad White this year. Another guy that I wouldn't really necessarily call him a breakout because we've seen it from him before, but Darren Waller in this 5 to 8 round range, I think he's going to be the guy for Daniel Jones, and he's going to see the targets at the tight end position. So I have him as my tight end 4, and I think he can do really well this year. So guys that I really want to avoid in this range are Cam Akers. We just haven't seen it from him. And I know he's the only back in LA really besides some of the rookies and Kyron Williams. Zach Evans is the rookie in LA. And I think Cam Akers still may struggle this year. I mean, I'd love to see it from him, but I'm just kind of staying away from a guy. And a guy that's going in this round of 5-8 range that I want to hear your take on is Alvin Kamara. He's suspended for the first 3 games of the year. They have some backs behind him in Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller is kind of banged up. Jamal Williams had a huge year last year, scoring like 16 touchdowns. So are you drafting a guy like Alvin Kamara who's going to be suspended in this range, or are you kind of avoiding him?
I'm avoiding Alvin Kamara. I'm going to let somebody else take the chance with him. The main thing is he's a declining player. He's not. They've kind of transitioned his role. Remember, he was an 80 catch guy 3 years in a row early in his career. Now he's getting the 40 and 50 range, which is still fine, but he's not doing what he did after the catch. He used to be most dangerous weapon in the game with the ball in his hands in the receiving game. Since Sean Payton left, a lot of those designed screens were routes. And for some of that time, he had Drew Brees, who would always put the ball perfectly to lead him into space. He hit top speed immediately. Now we're looking at Derek Carr. That's a completely different level of screen game quarterback, and that's without the screen design of Sean Payton there. And then you're going to tell me Kamara is going to run between the tackles. Well, he's going to be splitting that role with Jamal Williams. And so I just think overall, I think he's a player who was never going to age well. That super crazy explosiveness he had early in his career, that's not there anymore. And what's left at this point? If he's going to be a rotational back, even though he'll have the lead in that when he's back, I'm just not buying. I think the Saints defense, a lot of people have them ranked top 10. They lost a lot of infrastructure, and they're counting on a lot of guys that were rotational players to play full snaps. To me, if that defense goes south, they're going to have to become more reliant upon the wide receivers than the running game when they were able to win games with their defense.
Yeah, Saints defense is going around the late top 10 for defenses. The reason I think they're going so high in the draft is their schedule the first 6 weeks of the season is really good, but after that you kind of run into some problems. So you can take a flyer on their defense if you want later, but be cautious because once they hit some of those good teams that they play against and they're not going against some of the weaker teams in the NFL, I think you can see some negative weeks for that defense. But yeah, that's kind of why I like Chris Olave. I think they're going to have to rely on that pass game a lot more, and he's going to be the guy in that offense. Another guy that I'm kind of high on in this range is Jordan Addison. I have him as my wide receiver 24. He's taking that Adam Thielen role, which was the second most routes run in the NFL last year, him and Justin Jefferson. And so last year also, Adam Thielen was top 10 in red zone targets for wide receivers. And I think Jordan Addison going into that role, I think he's going to step right in and make an impact. I don't think KJ Osborne really poses that much of a threat. He's a really good player, but I think Jordan Addison is a better player and is really the wide receiver 2 in this offense behind Justin Jefferson. So yeah, that's a guy I like a little later on. Another guy I'm kind of high on for the QBs in this range is Trevor Lawrence. We talked about him earlier. He's in that elite offense. We saw it last year from him. I think he even takes up a step higher. Towards the end of the year last year, I mean, he was having some big games in fantasy, and I think we can see that from him for the whole season, really. So I'm really liking Trevor Lawrence this year. Another guy that I want to avoid a little later is Mike Evans. I don't know if he's really going to see as many targets as Chris Godwin in this offense. So I know Baker Mayfield's in there now. I just think Mike Evans is getting up there in age, and I'd rather take a guy like Jordan Addison with some upside in this range. So who do you hate in this range, Jim, in rounds 5 through 8?
Do you mind if I sell you on a few players I like? Because I really want to plant the flag on a few that I like.
Yeah. Go ahead and sell.
So the first one is Mike Williams. Mike Williams had 5 games when he saw 9 or more targets last year. In every one of those games, he had at least 86 yards. He performs extremely well with Justin Herbert. People say injuries. All right, last year he missed about 4 games. 6 years ago as a rookie, he missed 6. In the 4 years in between, he played 15 or 16 games. He is mostly on the field. Big misnomer. But the thing is, with Kellen Moore I was saying earlier in the show, I expect this to be a defense that's predicated more on the downfield pass, and getting Rashawn Slater back at left tackle healthy is really going to help. That line is way better than people think. Sawyer ended up having to move to tackle last year. He's going to go back to a natural guard position. Pipkins was hurt last year as right tackle. He's not great, but as the weak link in the line, he's not bad. But I'm expecting that offense to be able to thrive. I think Mike Williams is a major value. And I think this is the year that everything comes together for him. I'm also very high on Chris Godwin. Here's what I want people to know. When Baker Mayfield, before 2021, when he ripped his shoulder up and he was playing with bad shoulder, the 3 years prior, Jarvis Landry averaged 997 yards and 79 catches. Chris Godwin, and Jarvis Landry, cold respect to him, but Chris Godwin is a complete different level of player, and they play similar roles. Godwin is going to go well over 1,100 yards in this offense. Remember, last year, Godwin was coming off a December 2021 ACL, and he still had a 72nd percentile yards after the catch. but it wasn't the best he had. I will tell you, had 2 more, then I'll be quiet here. James Cook's another one. I really think the buzz on him is real. I believe that he has been taking those first down reps, and they need him to do that. I mentioned earlier that offense, even if they run 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, defenses are not going to stack the run. They are going to play the pass because they know Josh Allen could beat them, and they're not going to respect that. Well, Cook's going to get yards before contact, and he's also going to be used as a receiver. We saw his usage tick up late in the season and in the playoffs, and I expect that to continue. He is getting drafted in the 7th or 8th round of drafts, and I believe he could end up being as good as an RB2. The last one, everybody is out on James Conner, and here's what I'm going to tell you. From week 10 on last year, he averaged over 20 PPR points. They had no offensive line. They still have no offensive line. Much of that was without Kyler Murray. Maybe Murray doesn't play. The situation could be no worse for Conner than it was last year. And here's the other thing. Injuries. Okay. He had 1 year about 3 years ago. He missed 6 games. Every other year, he misses 2 to 3 games. I think there's a 4 sprinkle in there. Running backs miss time. Get over it. James Conner's going to miss a couple games. You're drafting him in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round. Maybe 6th, probably a 6th round for sure. Mm-hmm. You'll have other running backs in your team. You're not relying on him. But when he's healthy, he's an RB1. Nobody can question that. He had 46 catches last year. He tied his career high in yards per carry. Again, no line. This guy gets it done when he's on the field. Trust him then. That's good.
Yeah, you touched on some guys that I really love. I'm not super high on Mike Williams just because I'm a little nervous about his injury history. But you kind of sold me there with your take on that offense. Their offensive line is healthy. Justin Herbert's healthy. I think he has a chance to shine. I really like Chris Godwin as well. I think he's going to do way better than Mike Evans in this offense. He does do a lot of after the catch. And, yeah, I'm really high on James Cook as well in this range. I love what I saw from him last year. I mean, he averaged 5.7 yards per carry. He gets the receptions. He looks like his brother. Just a younger version. So, yeah, I'm all in on James Cook and James Conner. James Conner, people are sleeping on him because of he's kind of an older running back. But, I mean, he's going to see the volume. And in this range, that's what you really want out of your running back. You want a guy who's going to get volume in their offense. He's going to see a lot of volume. So, yeah, those are some guys that I really love as well. Another guy that may fall up into this range, I don't know if he's really going this high, but maybe like in rounds 9 or 10 is Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert is going to be the running back 1 on this offense, I believe. Deontay Foreman's in from Carolina. They drafted Roschon Johnson out of Texas. He was the backup to Bijan Robinson. Roschon Johnson has a lot of potential, but from what we saw from him last year, I know he was hurt a little bit, but he also averaged about 5.7 yards per carry. He was number 2 behind Pollard in rushing yards after contact at 3.73 yards. And over the last 3 years, Khalil Herbert's only missed 4 games. So I kind of like Khalil Herbert in this Chicago Bears offense, especially with the threat of Justin Fields on the ground, and add DJ Moore. Not to mention they have Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool. This Bears offense looks like they should be a pretty big threat. And I want to touch on another guy that I'm not a fan of in this range. It's Tyler Lockett. Entered Jackson Smith-Njigba, and you also have DK Metcalf. I think, Tyler Lockett's been a consistent wide receiver. He had a really good year last year. I mean, I can see him doing that again, but I don't really like this offense because they have 3 guys instead of 2 now. And I'm just worried, how much is JSN going to play a factor in this offense? And are you scared for Tyler Lockett, Jim, at all? Because we saw a top 24 wide receiver outing from him last year.
So Scotty the King Angle, one of my friends and analysts that he also writes for Seahawks.com, but he is like all things Seattle. He knows the whole NFL, but he is pointing out, and he's on the total bandwagon, 1 more year of Tyler Lockett. Okay. I'm going to miss this number. It's been like 5 straight years. He's had 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. And Look, Geno Smith is comfortable with him. Pete Carroll is a veteran guy. He loves it. And if his veteran does not give him a reason to push him to the side, his veterans will not go anywhere. He will not. He won't punish his veterans. Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, is going to be a superstar. Maybe next year. I think he's going to come in as a slot receiver, on third downs, or he really is a slot receiver. He's not even going to play outside. Tyler Lockett could do both. So Lockett will be a little more on the outside, but I think that Smith and Jigba's going to have a real big target squeeze against him. But like I said, I think Scotty Angle's right on this one. I think that the two starters, and Metcalf obviously plays a different position than both of them. He's just a classic X receiver. But unless Lockett gets hurt, his snapshot I don't think goes anywhere. And that's just an opinion. I like your call on that, but I kind of see it the same way.
Okay, yeah. So I'll take that guy's advice from Seahawks reporter. And another guy I want to hear your take on in this range is Kyle Pitts. He's falling down to this range. He has the potential to explode. I mean, he's super young. Everyone's been waiting for him to explode. Do you think he can do it this year with Desmond Ridder?
So obviously it's not a question of talent. It's a question of coaching. And Arthur Smith's an amazing coach for what he does. But what I saw last year with Kyle Pitts, it was a steady diet of downfield passes. And it's tactically smart because you're stretching defenses out. You're opening up and setting up things underneath for everybody else. But Pitts wasn't getting any layups. He wasn't getting short passes, intermediate passes. It was just downfield shots. And those are low percentage plays. And you're talking about last year, Mariota and Ridder. They are not good downfield passers. A lot of uncatchable passes downfield. Unless Coach Smith figures out to utilize Pitts better and use him all over the field as a weapon. And I can't get my mind around what he's going to do. He has Drake London at receiver, who uses him in the slot a lot. He brings in Bijan, who's going to weaponize. And so what is he going to do with Pitts? And that's the problem. Is he going to use him as a field stretcher? Because that hurts him. And so because of the uncertainty, and I can't make an educated guess because I haven't seen the coach use him right. So all the talent in the world. And if somebody drafts him as a tight end 4, yes, it can work out. Yes, he can put up 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. But I don't know the coach is going to do it, so I'm nervous.
Yep, I think everyone's nervous about him. We've been waiting to see it, and we just haven't seen it at all. So, yeah, that's a guy I'm a little nervous about. Is there anyone in this round's 9-10 range that you are not a fan of?
Can I give you the 3 I like real quick?
Yeah. Start off with the guys you like.
So if you're in a PPR league, I love Antonio Gibson last year. I was out on him this year. I'm in on him this year. Reason why? Coach Ron Rivera. Last year, if you heard Coach Ron Rivera speak, Rivera was out on Gibson last year. Basically told us McKissick's our receiving back, Brian Robinson's our early down back, and heart's on his sleeve. He tells us what he feels. This year, completely different tune. McKissick in his 70 targets, I believe, in 8 games or something like that, is gone. It was 40 targets. He's gone. And Coach Rivera has said Gibson is going to be a receiver in this backfield. Gibson publicly said, I'm the third down back. In a PPR league where we need running backs, at least a flex, emergency RB2, but I think Gibson is a very nice play. Rashad Bateman. We heard all these reports in June, and I bought in on them. Cortisone shot in the foot after a week 6 injury last year. Then I was listening to Joe Dolan's Franchise Focus podcast series, and he had a reporter from Baltimore on. He explained the cortisone shot was due to pain from the screw in the foot, not because of the injury. The screw was supposedly supposed to be taken out. So the shot was not because of a lingering injury. It was due to residual pain. Therefore, Bateman, who's now practicing in full, I think people are, like myself at one point, were overreacting to the cortisone shot. And I think he was on track to really break out last year. Now, his targets were low, but it's a new offense of Todd Monken. The last player I like. 10th round. PPR league, you need a 4th receiver. I've been out on this player in the past, but I'll explain why I'm in at this price on Juju Smith-Schuster. He wasn't going to make it in Kansas City. He got open quick, but Patrick Mahomes wants more than a short pass. He's looking for the next best thing downfield. So when he checked back and he needed a shorter pass, Smith-Schuster was there, but the numbers weren't going to pile up. In New England, Bill O'Brien's coaching the offense now. He coached with Mac Jones at Alabama with an RPO-based system. There are going to be a lot of zone reads. Smith-Schuster is very good at getting opening against zones. Based on the structure of this offense, I believe 75 catches is his floor.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a guy I haven't been drafting at all, but I'll look for him now because, yeah, I was a little nervous. New England's situation last year wasn't the best, but yeah, insert Bill O'Brien. I think Mac Jones will be a lot more comfortable this year. And honestly, if you're in a deep super flex league, this is just something that I've really thought of because I'm doing a super flex league this year. And as a QB3 in like a 12 or 14 super flex league, I'd look for Mac Jones. I mean, I just think he's kind of flying under the radar this year. And if you're going to wait on that QB3 in your super flex league, I mean, take a flyer on Mac Jones. I think he could surprise some people this year. But some guys I like in this round 9-10 range as well as Pat Freiermuth. I think he has a lot of potential as that number one tight end last year. We saw 98 targets for Freiermuth. I think he can get over that 100-yard or 100 target mark this year. And I like me some Muth. I also am a huge fan. If you wait on a QB, Tua isn't a bad, we're worried about Tua's injury history, but he is one of the best deep throwers in the NFL. And with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in this offense, I think he can provide a lot of value later on. But I'd also try and shore up your QB room if you do take Tua and take a guy with a solid floor, like maybe Jared Goff, who's going to throw the ball a little bit. But another guy, I don't know if he's going this early because I've seen him kind of falling down in drafts, is Elijah Moore. I'm a fan of this Browns offense. I talked about Amari Cooper earlier, and I think Elijah Moore is going to surprise a lot of people last year. He was really, really good in New York. He just didn't have the quarterbacks to get him the ball. Deshaun Watson will get him the ball, and I think they're going to feed him a lot. Some other guys going later, Jeff Wilson and Nico Collins. I like those guys just straight value plays because they're the number one guys in their offense. Jeff Wilson, I think, is going to see a decent amount of volume. He's still a younger back. Devon Achane comes in there, but I don't know if he really poses a threat on the goal line touches. So, yeah, those are some guys I like to target in rounds 9 to 10. So, going on to rounds 11 and on, I want to hear pretty much the later rounds. Who's your favorite sleeper in the later rounds? Maybe give me a couple if you got a couple as well. But yeah, who are your favorite sleepers later on?
I could give you three. Tyler Algier. So clearly Bijan Robinson is the guy. This has nothing to do with the depth chart we saw. Atlanta ran the ball 579 times last year, by far the league high, and they were usually in bad game script. They were trailing. I remember the Cincinnati game. They were losing by 20 points, and they were running the football. This year, their defense added a lot of pieces. They'll be more competitive. They've already shown us they'll run if it's bad. Now things will be a little better. So if they run 579 times, if Bijan gets 60% of the carries, that's about 300, a little bit more. Yeah. Algier is going to have a substantial role. You're going to see the way Arthur Smith uses formations. You're going to see Bijan and Algier on the field at the same time. Algier should get you about 8 to 10 carries a week. You're using him as a flex play. And of course, if Bijan happens to miss time, that would be a boost to Algier's help. But Algier will have standalone flex value. Next player I like, Anthony Richardson. I always say this to everybody. When Tim Tebow was an NFL starting quarterback, he was a QB1. And it has not changed. If you run, you are a QB1. Anthony Richardson's going to be an RPO-based system. Right now, the Colts have 5 tight ends on their roster. Now, they might not keep them all. But that tells me from an organizational standpoint, they're going to run 2 and 3 tight end sets, load up the blocking. The NFL defenses today are conditioned to stop the pass. There are smaller players than there used to be. The league has changed. When you're coming in and you're overwhelming people with bodies in the run game, you can take full advantage of it. Look at Arthur Smith. That's what he's been doing.
Yep.
And I mentioned earlier, the 2 interior linemen, Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, they're in their 20s. They both had bad years this year. I think they both are hurt because you don't lose your talent in your 20s. If you give me that line back, you're giving me heavy sets and an RPO base with a quarterback with the most dynamic running skill set and size combo we've ever seen. 900 rushing yards is the floor. I don't care about the passing. Tim Tebow proved you don't have to pass to be a, QB 10, QB 8. You draft him in round 11 or beyond, and he could be. And the last one I'll give you, Cole Kmet. He's going very late. People are drafting him as a tight end 18.
Yeah.
Chase Claypool, their receiver, has missed time on and off throughout camp. They have no big bodies to catch the ball. We know they have DJ Moore on the outside. They have the blazing speed of Mooney, 4.33 wheels on the others. I think 4.35 wheels. The middle of the field is going to need a threat. Cole Kmet, people talk about Robert Tonyan. When they're in 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, and they need a passing game where both are out there on the field. But when they go to the 12 personnel when they need blocking, it's going to be Kmet and Mercedes Lewis. Kmet was paid on a contract of a few year length. They're paying him. He is a central part of that offense. He has already shown us a chemistry with Justin Fields. Cole Kmet should be able to come in, and it's not saying much, as a top 10 tight end at tight end 18 prices. Again, top 10 isn't much, but he should get there.
Yep. I actually talked about him on my tight end episode this past week, and I have him as a breakout. He saw the most targets in that Bears offense last year. It wasn't many, but, DJ Moore is going to be the guy who sees the most targets in that offense. Cole Kmet, I think, can be second in targets in that offense. And, he's going super late. And I also want to mention his ADOT was 6.1 last year. For reference, DJ Moore's was 12.9. I think he's kind of that short area target guy for Justin Fields, kind of that safety net that he's going to be looking for. And, I love him for going as late as he's going. You got to take some Kmet. I also like the rookie tight ends. Like Sam Laporta is one guy I'm really high on. He's in that TJ Hawkinson role in Detroit. The only other guy that is really going to pose a threat to him, I think, is probably Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon Ra until Jamison Williams gets back. So early in the season, Sam Laporta could be a difference maker. And I like taking a tight end later in drafts. I'm not a huge, really the only early tight end I'm a huge fan of is Kelsey, just because of the floor he provides, and he's really a safety net. But another guy that I have a couple sleepers in this range are Zamir White. Tank Dell is another guy that I kind of like. He's making noise in the preseason. I watched him in Houston against my Texas Tech Red Raiders, and he tore us apart every time we played him. So he's a fun guy to watch. Another guy I like in dynasty leagues that is going super late is Tajay Spears. You can practically get him free as your last pick in the draft. That's a guy I'm kind of high on. And a guy that, Matthew Stafford's health worries me, but if you're looking for a tight end with a pretty solid floor, it's going to be Tyler Higbee. He's getting up there in age, but if you're looking for a guy to pair with a rookie and Sam Laporta that can give you upside, or Dalton Kincaid, so you're looking for a guy to pair with a guy with upside, so Tyler Higbee, in my opinion. So those are some sleepers. And now I want to hear you, who your breakout wide receiver is for the year, the number one breakout wide receiver on your list for this year.
Well, I'm going to say it's Rashad Bateman. He hasn't broken out close yet. He played 12 games, 6 games. He hasn't broken out. And I think in this Todd Monken offense, where they're going to attack downfield on early downs, Bateman can win on a lot of different routes, but he can get downfield. He is a very good runner, and I think the foot's fine. I think he's the guy who's breaking out. I mean, I know they draft Zay Flowers, and I know Odell Beckham is in. Beckham's coming off an ACL. He's 30 years old. I think Flowers is a learning curve, but I think Bateman at least has some rapport already with Lamar Jackson, and I think he's the guy whose rocket ship is going up.
I like that. We saw from him last year. He was hit on a couple deep routes, and I'd love to see him healthy. So, he was dealing with his foot injury, but he's back practicing now. So, I like that pick. I'd say my wide receiver breakout is probably Jordan Addison, just the offense that he's in. I think he has a good potential to break out. And another question I got for you, kind of a closing question, is what is your bold prediction for this NFL season?
All right, I'm not one in a hot takes, but I am sold on this one. By October 1st, Chase Edmonds will be the most productive back in the Tampa Bay backfield. Oh. So when he was with Arizona for 4 years, he was a very good receiving back and a very good complementary runner. And then he goes to Miami last year, and everybody remembers it was a train wreck. He did not get that system at all. But what everybody forgets is He gets traded to Denver, and then he gets a high ankle sprain. But he comes back the last couple games of the season. He was the same Chase Edmonds that he was in Arizona in those last couple games. So to me, it was completely a poor system fit in Miami. Now, Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator, brings him into Tampa. And when you mentioned Rachaad White, don't forget, he was an number eighth percentile broken tackle rate. He's got really skinny legs, and he is a guy that can't break tackles. And we know Chase Edmonds can. Chase Edmonds has proven that already. So and now back to Dave Canales. Canales coached against him in the NFC West, and he's already made comments of how important Edmonds is to his offense because he knows firsthand what Chase Edmonds can do. Chase Edmonds is a very good player. Rachaad White was 3.7 yards per carry last year. It wasn't the offensive line. Some of it was. Some of it was bad play calling, but he can't break tackles. And if you can't break tackles, and also after contact, I believe he was 34th percentile. So he can't even get much yardage after contact. So that's my bold prediction. Chase Edmonds by October 1st is the most productive back in the Tampa Bay backfield.
Man, that's a good take. You're making me want to stay away from Rachaad White now and draft more James Cook in that range. Because honestly, I'm a huge fan of James Cook, and you can get him a little later than Rachaad White. So that'd be my pick to get a little later. And honestly, I think he's going to break out this year as long as he sees the volume. So today we really went over all of the rounds in the drafts, kind of some sleepers we like, players we like to draft, players we don't like to draft. I think this was some really good insight for the listeners so they can look in these ranges and see who we talked about and whether or not they want to draft them based on what we were saying. I think we did a really good job. So, yeah, Jim, I know you have some content on Rotowire, and I was wondering, where can everyone find all of your content and listen to you talk?
The best hub of finding all my work is on the X or Twitter, whatever we want to call it these days. I'm at Jim Coventry NFL. I'll always post all my work there. I do Rotowire live show on Rotowire YouTube. I do that 5 days a week. I'm off Thursday and Friday. I'm on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio Saturdays and Sundays in the preseason, 1 to 3 Eastern. I do daily, 5 days a week, Twitter threads on players going into draft season. Again, that's on the X or Twitter. And so if you just go there and find me, obviously it links you to my Rotowire work. If you want a free subscription for Rotowire, go to rotowire.com/Jim. You don't need a credit card, just an email address. And then you can check out the articles and all that good stuff. And that's pretty much it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll include your Twitter in this description for this episode of the podcast so the listeners can find it. I really appreciate you coming on and giving your insight for all these fantasy players. I think this is going to be a really good episode for the listeners, and I'm excited to get this year rolling for everyone's draft. It's almost football season. I'm ready to go. So, yeah, thank you for coming on, and everyone, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.